What if your goodness is the very thing that's making you powerless? What if honesty, kindness, and fairness, values you've lived by, are the same tools being used to control you? Niccolo Machiavelli didn't sugarcoat human nature. He exposed it. And for that, he was called dangerous, immoral, an enemy of the human race. But beneath the scandal lies a truth most people are too afraid to admit. The world is not ruled by virtue but by perception, fear, and strategy. In this video, we uncover Machiavelli's most brutal insights from The Prince, why it's safer to be feared than loved, how deception protects power, and why expecting loyalty is a fool's game. But we won't stop there. We'll also show how Stoic clarity can help you use this knowledge without becoming corrupt. This isn't about becoming ruthless. It's about refusing to stay naive. If you're tired of being outplayed, overlooked, or used, stay. And if you're ready to see the world clearly, like and subscribe. Let's begin.
Number 1.
Pragmatism over morality. Machiavelli's first and most unsettling lesson is this. In the pursuit of power, what works matters more than what's right. To those raised on ideals of fairness and justice, that statement feels like betrayal. But to Machiavelli, it was a necessary awakening. He wasn't interested in how the world should work. He was obsessed with how it actually worked. And in the brutal political chaos of Renaissance Italy, where loyalty was currency and survival was warfare in disguise, he saw clearly that men who clung to moral ideals were often destroyed by those who didn't. So he gave his advice without flinching. If deception protects your position, use it. If cruelty prevents greater chaos, wield it. The survival of the state, not the virtue of the individual, is the higher duty, not because Machiavelli rejected goodness, but because he understood that the world often punishes those who assume others share their values. In his view, morality was optional. Strategy was not. Now this seems to clash with the teachings of the Stoics. After all, the Stoics prized virtue above all else: justice, courage, temperance, and wisdom. But if you look deeper, you'll find that Stoicism isn't naive. It doesn't assume that the world is fair. It doesn't promise that good men will always prosper. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake in any thought or action, I shall gladly change. I seek the truth, which never harmed anyone." The harm is to persist in one's own self-deception and ignorance. What this reveals is the Stoics' greatest strength: clarity, not idealism, clarity grounded in personal responsibility. And it is here that Stoicism and Machiavelli intersect. Both reject illusion, both demand that you face reality on its terms, but they diverge in one crucial way. Machiavelli detaches from morality completely. The Stoic holds on to virtue, not to win, not to be admired, but because it is the one thing that remains under your control. That's the Stoic's edge. He doesn't need the world to be just. He simply refuses to become unjust himself. He does not surrender his values to convenience, but neither does he offer them blindly. Now consider Michelangelo, known for divine beauty and art, but behind the chisel was a man of deep realism. He worked under tyrants, he navigated betrayals, he produced masterpieces under the watchful gaze of men who could ruin him, yet he never compromised his vision. He never waited for perfect conditions. He did what was necessary to survive politically, while remaining devoted to his craft. That is the union of strategy and virtue. He moved through systems of power without becoming their servant. We see another example in Eleanor Roosevelt, a first lady, yes, but more importantly, a strategist of immense moral clarity. She was surrounded by men playing power games, yet she maneuvered with dignity and influence. She knew how to speak truth to power without being exiled from it. She advocated for justice, not by preaching from a distance, but by understanding how systems worked and bending them toward change. Her power wasn't loud, it was relentless, She was not naive, but she never became bitter. Her influence came not from rebellion, but from mastery. Machiavelli would say, "Adapt or perish." The Stoics would add, "Adapt without losing your soul." That is the essence. Don't abandon your values, but also don't expect others to reward you for them. You are not owed fairness. You are responsible for clarity. Seneca said, "The wise man is neither raised up by prosperity nor cast down by adversity." Why? Because he doesn't build his foundation on the behavior of others. He builds it on his own reasoned choices. His self-respect is internal, his strategy deliberate. So what do we do with Machiavelli's harsh advice? We don't become liars, we don't become tyrants, but we stop expecting the world to honor our decency. We stop believing that good intentions guarantee good outcomes. Instead, we act with integrity. While preparing for betrayal, we speak with honesty. While recognizing manipulation, we hold to virtue. Not because the world respects it, but because we do. And we learn to read people, timing, and motives. Not to deceive them, but to protect ourselves from being deceived. Because in the end, power respects results. The man who endures is not the one who wishes the world were gentler, but the one who walks through its cruelty without surrendering his essence. Machiavelli shows us what clarity looks like without conscience. The Stoics show us how conscience survives with clarity. When you put the two together, something rare emerges. A man who sees the game, but is not lost in it. A person who plays to win, but on their terms, and above all, a soul who moves through shadows without becoming darkness itself.
Number 2.
A harsh mirror, human nature cannot be trusted. If you want to understand power, you must first understand people. And that, according to Machiavelli, means accepting something most of us would rather ignore. People are not loyal, consistent, or grateful by nature. They are driven by fear, by gain, and by self-interest. And this, he says, is why no ruler or any person who wishes to remain free should ever rely on the loyalty of others. It is a mistake to assume that your kindness will be remembered, or that your integrity will earn protection. In Machiavelli's world, and often in ours, trust must be earned again and again, but betrayal only takes a single moment. This may sound cynical, but it's not bitterness, it's clarity. When you remove the comforting illusion that people will act justly simply because you do, you begin to see the world as it is, not as you wish it to be. Machiavelli believed that a ruler who built his foundation on trust and affection alone would fall the moment fear or desire shifted the hearts of his followers. People are loyal when it benefits them. They are supportive when they are watched. They are moral when there are consequences. And when those incentives vanish, so does their loyalty. The Stoics didn't go as far, but they weren't naive. Epictetus warned, "When someone acts foolishly, don't respond with anger. Ask instead, what mistaken judgment are they making?" In other words, people don't always act from malice. Often they act from ignorance, misjudging what is good or what is necessary. That ignorance leads to betrayal, to selfishness, to sudden reversals. So to a Stoic, expecting others to live by your values is not a sign of hope. It's a setup for disappointment. And yet many of us suffer needlessly, not because people are evil, but because we expected them to be better than they are. We place faith where there should have been observation. We trusted where there should have been testing. The Stoics remind us that peace begins not when others become perfect, but when we let go of the fantasy that they will. The goal is not to become cold, but to become wise. Consider Benjamin Franklin, not just as a statesman, but as a master of human nature. He understood that people are moved by self-interest far more than by principle. Rather than fight this, he used it. He once said, "If you want to make a friend, ask them to do you a favor." Why? Because once someone helps you, they rewrite the story in their mind. I help this person. I must like them. Franklin didn't demand loyalty, he engineered it through insight. That is not manipulation, that is strategy rooted in realism. Contrast this with the idealist who believes their goodness should protect them. They believe that being kind guarantees respect, that helping others guarantees help in return. But that belief is not noble. It's dangerous. It exposes you to people who smile when they need you, then vanish when you don't. Marcus Aurelius knew this well. He wrote, "Today you will meet people who are meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." But he didn't resent them. He simply stopped being surprised. Even as emperor, Marcus didn't expect others to rise to his standards. He focused on maintaining his own. That's Stoic detachment in action, expecting the worst while remaining grounded in the best of yourself. He was never bitter, but he was never blind. So how do we apply this? First, stop measuring people by your own character. Just because you wouldn't lie, cheat, or disappear doesn't mean they won't. Second, observe people not in their words, but in their patterns. Do they keep their word? Do they disappear when you need them most? Do they treat you with respect even when you have nothing to offer? These are not harsh judgments. They are necessary filters. And third, let your kindness be who you are, not what you trade for loyalty. If someone walks away after receiving your best, let them. It means they were never built to stay. Better to see it now than to build your life on a hollow foundation. True loyalty doesn't need to be demanded. It proves itself in silence, in storms, in absence. Because real power does not come from controlling people. It comes from understanding them, from predicting their shifts without being shaken by them. Machiavelli understood this from the shadows of power. The Stoics taught it from the core of the soul. And when you hold both together, you no longer fear betrayal. You expect it and prepare for it without ever losing your dignity. The one who suffers least is not the one who trusts blindly. It's the one who sees through everyone and still chooses to live with quiet strength.
Number 3.
It's safer to be feared than loved, but only if you control yourself. Few lines in political philosophy are more quoted or more misunderstood than Machiavelli's famous claim that it is safer to be feared than loved. At first glance, it seems like a doctrine for tyrants, a cold dismissal of empathy, a celebration of dominance over compassion. But that's not what Machiavelli was truly saying. His point was simple. If you must choose between being loved and being feared, because you cannot be both, then fear is more reliable. Because love is voluntary, love can fade. But fear, if rooted in respect and not cruelty, creates boundaries that hold. He was not advocating terror, he was advocating stability. In a chaotic world, fear commands more consistent behavior than love. And that is a difficult truth, because many good people are taught that if they're just kind enough, forgiving enough, patient enough, others will treat them well. But the world doesn't work that way. People often take kindness for weakness and generosity for permission. If you do not set boundaries, they will not restrain themselves. And if you do not stand firm, they will test you again and again. Here's where Stoicism refines Machiavelli's lesson. The Stoics would never teach that we should inspire fear in others. That's ego, but they did teach that we should never depend on external affection to determine our worth. Seneca said, "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than necessary." That includes emotional dependence, especially the kind that makes us afraid of losing approval. The Stoic does not need to be loved. He needs to be centered, to know what he stands for, and to live it quietly and consistently, even when others withhold praise. So what does that look like in practice? It means your presence should carry weight, not because you threaten anyone, but because you know who you are. You don't need to shout, you don't need to impress. Your boundaries speak for you. Your time is guarded. Your words are measured. You are not available to everyone Because your energy is not free, this quiet firmness often inspires more respect than endless friendliness. Let's look at a real example. Steve Jobs, controversial, yes, but undeniably respected. He was not loved by everyone. Many thought he was harsh, demanding, even cold. But his clarity of vision, his intensity, and his refusal to settle for mediocrity created an atmosphere where people stepped up. His presence changed the behavior of others, not through fear of punishment, but fear of disappointing a standard. That's what Machiavelli meant. Jobs didn't need to be liked. He needed to lead. And in doing so, he left a mark that admiration alone could never create. Now contrast that with the person who bends to be liked, who says yes when they mean no, who forgives without consequence, who avoids confrontation and waters down truth to stay on good terms. That person might be loved, but they are rarely respected. And when pressure comes, love disappears. What remains is how clearly you've taught people to treat you. Marcus Aurelius led with calm presence. He didn't rule with violence, but with principle. He didn't demand fear, but he inspired it through self-command. People followed him because they sensed that his mind was anchored. He could not be swayed by flattery, nor shaken by insult. He didn't try to be feared, but he understood that dignity creates a kind of distance. And in that distance, people think twice before they cross you. So how do we embody this? First, detach from the need to be liked. It's not indifference, it's sovereignty. If your mood rises and falls based on how others perceive you, you're not free. The Stoic teaches us that peace begins where dependency ends. Second, make your standards visible, not by preaching them, but by embodying them. When someone crosses a line, respond with calm clarity. You don't need to rage. You need to remain. Boundaries are most powerful when they are consistent and unemotional. Third, limit your availability, not to punish others, but to honor yourself. Love without self-respect invites exploitation. Presence without principle attracts chaos. But when you move deliberately, when you speak thoughtfully, when you act in alignment, you no longer need to demand fear. It will arrive quietly in the form of respect. Because ultimately, Machiavelli's point was not that fear is good. It was that fear, when balanced by discipline and intention, protects you when love cannot. And Stoicism completes that insight. Fear is not something you create in others. It's the calm intensity you build in yourself. The kind that silences rooms. The kind that draws lines without speaking. The kind that replaces the need to please with the power to walk away. To be feared without self-control is tyranny, but to be respected without needing affection, that is power, that is presence, that is peace.
Number 4.
Be the lion and the fox, but tame the beast within first. Machiavelli's most poetic metaphor comes from a fable. A ruler, he said, must be both a lion and a fox. The lion represents strength, the power to crush opposition, to defend territory, to enforce law. The fox, on the other hand, symbolizes cunning, the ability to detect traps, navigate deceit, and outmaneuver hidden threats. Power without cunning is easily deceived, but cunning without strength is easily crushed. Together, they form the full spectrum of strategic leadership. But here's where it gets deeper. Machiavelli warned that most people operate with neither. They are neither strong enough to defend themselves nor clever enough to avoid being manipulated. And in such a world, if you do not learn to embody both the lion and the fox, you will be used by those who do. This is the brutal game of power, but it is also a truth of everyday life. If you are only forceful, you will be resisted. If you are only clever, you will be exposed. To walk freely, you must be both feared and underestimated, direct and unreadable, calm and unpredictable. Now, Stoicism meets this duality with a crucial addition: inner restraint. The Stoic does not simply act from strength or cunning, but from conscious direction. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." So being the lion and the fox is not about dominating others. It's about mastering yourself so completely that you can deploy either trait deliberately, never reactively. You become strategic not because you want to control people, but because you refuse to be controlled by impulses. Let's look at Leonardo da Vinci, not just the artist, but the strategist. In the volatile courts of Renaissance Italy, he served dukes, princes, and popes who were often dangerous, unstable, and deeply political. Da Vinci knew when to flatter, when to remain silent, and when to withdraw. He was no fool. He saw the traps, he played the long game, but he also didn't abandon excellence. His work spoke louder than his alliances. That is what it means to be the fox, seeing the dangers, while the lion within holds steady to purpose and mastery. But this isn't just about elite figures. You see this pattern every day. The person who is too soft gets stepped on. The person who is too aggressive becomes resented. The one who thrives is the one who knows when to be gentle and when to be firm, when to act visibly and when to move in silence. They do not reveal all their thoughts. They do not speak simply to fill the room. Their strength lies not just in what they say, but in what they choose to withhold. Marcus Aurelius, though an emperor, was not immune to danger. He was surrounded by flattery, manipulation, and attempts to sway his decisions. But his strength lay in restraint. He wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That's the fox avoiding the trap. And when he had to act, he acted with purpose, not pride. That's the lion, but without rage. That's why he endured, not because he fought back louder, but because he stayed anchored while others drifted into chaos. So what does it mean for you? It means learning to read the room, not just socially, but energetically. Pay attention to who speaks too much, who flatters too quickly, who hides behind charm. Then choose your moves with clarity. Be unpredictable enough to be respected, but stable enough to be trusted. Never become so predictable that others know your limits, or worse, your weaknesses. Second, use silence strategically. The fox watches more than it speaks. The lion doesn't roar unless it must. If you react to every insult, respond to every challenge, or explain yourself to every critic, you're not in control, you're being controlled. But when you pause, observe, and move with calculation, people feel your presence without you needing to announce it. Third, never confuse manipulation with wisdom. A fox who deceives everyone eventually becomes hated, and a lion who crushes everyone eventually becomes feared and isolated. Balance isn't just strategy, it's survival. And the Stoic knows this deeply. You win not by overpowering others, but by outlasting the chaos with clarity. You win by using your traits, not being used by them. To be both the lion and the fox is to be powerful, but to be both under discipline is to be dangerous, in the best possible way. Because then you are not just adapting to the world, you are shaping it, quietly, deliberately, unapologetically.
Number 5.
Power without conscience is a fire without a hearth. Machiavelli never pretended to be a moral teacher. He observed power with surgical coldness, stripping away illusions of honor, loyalty, or justice. In doing so, he provided a set of tools, but no compass. And that's the danger, because when you strip everything down to strategy, when all that matters is results, you risk building an empire on emptiness. It's like fire with no hearth, heat with no direction, force with no peace. To the Machiavellian, the end always justifies the means. But to the Stoic, not all outcomes are worth the cost of your character. That's the dividing line. The Stoics believed in strategy, clarity, and resilience, but never at the price of the soul. Seneca wrote, "No man is crushed by misfortune unless he has first been deceived by prosperity." What he meant was this: if you chase only what works, if you define success by influence or image alone, you will eventually collapse under your own weight, because without an inner core, power consumes you. Machiavelli's lens is useful, but incomplete. It explains how people rise, but Stoicism explains how people remain. It's not just about getting what you want, it's about becoming someone who can live with what you've built, because power, like money or fame, reveals you more than it protects you. If you don't have structure, if you don't have principle, power only accelerates your collapse. This is why many of the so-called powerful end up paranoid, isolated, or miserable. They mastered others, but not themselves. Nowhere is this more visible than in the lives of people who combined ambition with inner clarity. Take Oprah Winfrey. Her rise to influence was not just about intelligence or charisma. It was about restraint, long-term vision, and self-awareness. She didn't chase every opportunity. She walked away from fame traps. She built something sustainable by refusing to trade integrity for immediacy. She once said, "Real integrity is doing the right thing, knowing that nobody's going to know whether you did it or not." That's not Machiavellian, that's Stoic. This brings us to the Stoic ideal of eudaimonia, a state of flourishing, of harmony between action and values. True power doesn't come from being feared, followed, or admired. It comes from waking up each day knowing that your actions are aligned with your principles, and that kind of power cannot be taken because it isn't granted by others in the first place. Now contrast this with the hollow strategist, the one who lies to get ahead, who flatters to secure position, who sacrifices trust for influence. This person may rise, but they will not endure, because every step forward costs them something real. Their conscience erodes, their peace dissolves, and what they build becomes a castle of glass, clear to the world, but brittle under pressure. The Stoics teach that real power is quiet, Marcus Aurelius wrote. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. That's the difference. The Stoic does not broadcast his virtue, he lives it. And because he lives it, he builds strength that is hard to break. He may use strategy, but never as a replacement for integrity. So what's the application for us? First, recognize the temptation to play the short game. There will always be moments where lying seems easier, where silence seems safer, where charm feels more useful than truth. And that's where character is revealed. Not when it's easy to be honest, but when it costs you something. That's the testing ground of real power. Second, define success beyond outcomes. Power that depends on applause is fragile, but power rooted in principle is self-sustaining. If your peace can be taken away by rejection, failure, or someone else's opinion, you were never in control to begin with. The Stoic focuses not on winning, but on being worthy of winning. Third, treat strategy as a tool, not an identity. Use cunning when necessary. Speak carefully, observe, read people, but don't let that replace your humanity. Don't let the game of power become your only game. As Epictetus said, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Machiavelli gave us the map of how power works, but Stoicism gives us the compass of who we become in the process. And without the compass, the map leads nowhere. Because at the end of every achievement, every strategy, every victory, there is only the question, can you live with yourself? Power without conscience is a fire that burns everything it touches, but power with purpose? That's a flame that warms, that endures, that builds, not because others fear you, but because you no longer fear losing yourself. Number 6, strategy without soul leads to collapse. At the end of every Machiavellian strategy, after the manipulation, the silence, the image control, there's a question waiting. Was it worth it? You may have won, you may have risen, but what did you become in the process? This is the part Machiavelli never fully answered. And this is where Stoicism steps in, not as a contradiction, but as a completion. Because Machiavelli taught us how to move through the world, the Stoics teach us how to live with ourselves while we do. Strategy without soul is like a map with no compass. It gets you somewhere, but not always somewhere worth being. And that's what happens to many people. They get what they want, only to realize they've lost the part of themselves that could enjoy it. They've mastered power, but feel empty in the mirror. Stoicism begins with this truth. Your outer world is only as stable as your inner world, Epictetus said. No man is free unless he is master of himself. That means the ultimate strategy isn't in defeating others. It's in staying whole while walking through fire. It's easy to get what you want by becoming what you hate. It's harder, but infinitely more valuable, to reach your goal and still like the person who arrived there. Let's take a real example. Maya Angelou. She faced rejection, racism, abuse, and exile. But she never lost her center. She moved with poise, with self-respect, and with strategic intelligence. She said, I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it. That is the Stoic mindset applied to a world that tried to break her, not to flatter, not to manipulate, but to tell the truth with dignity. She had strategy, but rooted it in soul. And that is what most people forget. Strategy is a tool, but the soul is the architect. Strategy can open doors, but without values, it leads you into rooms where you don't belong. That's why so many smart, successful people burn out. They thought the game was about climbing, but they never asked if the ladder was leaning against the right wall. Now contrast that with people who rise fast and fall faster, the ones who gain influence by pleasing everyone, the ones who hide behind charisma but have no core. Eventually, pressure exposes them. Why? Because strategy with no values becomes self-destruction in disguise. The Stoic approach is different. It's slower, quieter, less glamorous, but it endures. Because it's not about appearing powerful. It's about becoming unshakable. Marcus Aurelius didn't rely on titles. He didn't care about legacy. He cared about integrity. If it is not right, he wrote, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Simple, ruthless, clear. He could navigate power games, but he refused to become their victim. So how do we apply this? First, slow down. Ambition is not a race. Most mistakes happen when we rush. When we act without alignment, take the time to ask, why am I doing this? Who am I becoming in the process? The Stoics believe that virtue is a daily choice, not a one-time decision. Every action is either building your soul or weakening it. Second, choose clarity over cleverness. Being smart is useful, but being grounded is transformational. Strategy without clarity leads to confusion. Clarity without strategy leads to stagnation. You need both, but always in the right order. Machiavelli tells you how to move. Stoicism tells you where to root. When in doubt, root first. Third, hold your boundaries. Even when it costs you, power isn't proven by what you gain. It's revealed by what you're willing to walk away from, and that includes people, positions, and praise. Epictetus said, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Because real growth looks like loss to those who don't understand it. And finally, never let ambition override peace. There's a reason some people seem light, even while holding great weight. It's because they've made peace with themselves. Their strategy serves their soul, not the other way around. They don't need to manipulate. They don't need to perform. Because in the end, the question isn't just, did it work? The real question is, did it last? And more importantly, did I remain intact? Strategy can win the game, But only soul can carry the victory without breaking under it. Machiavelli gave us the tools, but the Stoics remind us why we use them. Not to control others, not to rise above the crowd, but to remain whole, calm, and clear when everyone else is chasing shadows. If you've made it this far, then you understand something most people never will. Power without clarity is a prison. Influence without inner order is chaos. Machiavelli showed us the game. But the Stoics, they showed us the soul. And without soul, the game devours you. So if this video helped you see through the noise, if it gave you the strength to pause, reflect, and protect your essence, then I ask you, support this message, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share this with someone who's losing themselves trying to win. Remember, the most dangerous thing in the world is not failure, it's success without identity. Don't climb if you don't know who you are, and don't chase applause when silence holds the answers. This isn't just philosophy, this is survival. This is power without poison. Stay strong, stay clear, and above all, stay rooted.